The review is about to begin. Boy! Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick Push. Today we are talking one of the most fascinating horror movies of all time, 1979's Phantasm, which just created a franchise. I'm not here to talk about the franchise, I'm just talking about this original movie, which, as I said, is just fascinating and it's just baked with brilliant imagery and just chaotic themes and all kinds of different things this movie is trying to tell us. So I'm going to get into, the plot of this movie and what it's about, some questions I have. But first, I want to hear in the comments, are you guys a fan of Phantasm? And is this movie really happening? Or is it all a figment of Mike's dreams and imagination? So, right off the bat, guys, this story tells the story of a young boy, Mike, and his older brother Jody, who a couple years earlier experienced the death of their parents. And now it is kind of diving into Mike, who we follow, who's the younger sibling, and his fear of death and his fear of abandonment from his older brother Jody. And what happens is just a batshit crazy plot that just goes absolutely every fucking direction you could think of, and about 12 directions you couldn't think of. And it's just a really, really fun time. But basically, the general premise, I don't even know if you can call it a premise, because this is just a batshit crazy story. But the general premise is Mike is following Jody around because he's scared to lose him. Okay, and Jody even acknowledges this partway through the movie. But he just lost his parents, or they just lost their parents. Mike is scared he's going to lose Jody too, so he's following his brother around everywhere. And the movie begins with quite the sex scene, which ends up into a death scene of Jody's friend. So Jody is attending the funeral at this crazy, not gothic, but just this crazy funeral home, huge funeral home. And Mike follows Jody there, and wackiness ensues because, Mike, whether it's in his mind or not, he sees the caretaker lift up a casket by himself, and it's like a 500-pound casket, and put it in the hearse. And that leads to all kinds of different crazy shenanigans going on where, Mike is then going back to the cemetery and funeral home and diving into the mystery of what he witnessed and what they call the tall man, which we're going to get into him, what he actually is. And like I said, it just goes in a million different directions where he's trying to convince Jody what he saw and what he is seeing, and he just keeps keep unraveling as the movie goes along, and it just goes one batshit crazy direction after another. Like I said, it's a fascinating story that it's just almost impossible to explain. I got some visual aids I'm going to pull up in a moment here. But first, the thing I like about this movie, there's lots I like about this movie. But the main thing I like is this movie gives us way more questions than answers. Some of the questions right off the bat. Number one, that sphere. What is that sphere? There's a moment, and you can see it right on the screen here, where the sphere just comes flying out of nowhere at the funeral home or at the cemetery and just starts pecking at some guy's head, and blood is squirting everywhere. What the fuck is that? I hate to use the term iconic because I think that is just used way too loosely these days, but in the horror analog, or whatever you want to call it, that sphere from the Phantasm franchise is absolutely iconic. Another question, as I alluded to earlier in the video, is this real or is this a dream? Okay, tell me in the comments what you guys think. I think it's got to be in Mike's mind, right? This has to be all his issues that he is having from his fear of abandonment, from the loss of his parents, from, the possible future loss of Jody, and all kinds of shit going on. There's so many different images of Mike in a bed, and we're going to get to my favorite one later in this review, but there's just so many iconic and just brilliant images in this movie that just, they don't answer any questions. They just lead to more questions. And I love that about movies. Nowadays, everyone just has to have everything answered. What does this mean? What does that mean? Whether it's Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, what have we learned from horror movies and sequels and franchises is the more we answer these questions, the less satisfying the answers are, and the more fanboys or whatever the hell you want to call them get upset because it's not the answers they wanted. So I love that if you just take this movie as a solo movie, it's just batshit crazy, and there's so many questions. Speaking of questions, what the fuck is this tall man? What is he? Tall man's played by Ignis Scrim. Just brilliant performance by him. So many just subtle nuances that he does. There's some images of him I want to get into shortly here. But it's just brilliant. He's so fucking creepy. The way he turns, his body is just creepy. The way he stares, the way he says, boy, it's just fucking fantastic. And it's a shame that, as much as people know what Phantasm is and what the movie series is and what the franchise is, it's a shame that the tall man isn't mentioned more with Freddy, Michael, Jason, etc. Because he really is a fascinating character. And it's funny because Ignis Scrim isn't even that tall. He's like 6'4". So yeah, he's tall, but he's not huge. If they made this nowadays, he'd be like 8 feet tall, and it'd kind of take away from it. So the tall man, with what he's doing in this movie, he's like creating an army of interdimensional beings from dead people. I don't know. It's fucking crazy, and the tall man is just great. Speaking of that, what are the Jawa things? And I say Jawa because like Star Wars, these guys look like Jawas. They're just little cloaked robe things. When Mike and Jody at separate points break into the funeral home, they're attacked by these little guys in robes, and you see these little guys in robes just attacking them at all times. And I know it's explained more in the sequels. I'm not going to get into that, but essentially this is what the tall man is creating. This army of, like I said, interdimensional beings or some shit. It's not quite clear. So in that regard, what is happening here? That's where you get into this is all just a dream sequence, right? This whole movie, is it a dream sequence? Is it not? Because of the way this goes, and it feels like we're seeing things from certain point of views, and the director is smart enough to have these voiceovers where it just cuts to another scene while the voiceover is still going on, and you don't know if it's real or not, or it happened in the past or not, or it's happening in the future or not. That really just lets credence to the dream sequence, and it kind of creates this sense of confusion where you don't know what is actually happening. And like I said, I like shit like that. I like shit that makes you think, and what the fuck is going on here? So that is just fantastic. A couple more things I want to talk about, guys. And like I said, it's impossible to describe the plot of this movie. If you haven't seen Phantasm, go watch it. But a couple things I want to talk about here are the set pieces, the cinematography, and some of just the brilliant, chaotic imagery. All right, I'm going to bring up a couple photos here. I got 5 photos I want to bring up. Number one, the first 2 are kind of related. So look at this photo right here. You got Mike, and he's in the funeral home, and he is kind of putting his hand into another dimension. And look at the way it's shot. You got Mike, and then everything is bright. Look at how like shiny these metal poles are. And continuing on, same thing here. We got the 3 characters of Mike, his older brother Jody, and Jody's friend Reggie, who drives an ice cream truck. And he is supposed to be in his mid-20s, late 20s, but he looks 50. I don't know. Never mind. It's the 70s, man. It's the 70s. Everybody looked like that. But look at the imagery here of these poles and, the bright white room. So good. All right. A few more images I want to get into because I can't do it justice without pulling up some visual aids here. Look at this. Here we got the tall man in the funeral home. You got the marble walls. Look at him standing there. Look at how menacing he fucking is as a villain right there. Got the sharp suit that like an Undertaker would be wearing because that's what he is. And just, the funeral home, everything is just marble. You got a statue there on the side. Just absolutely fantastic. And he's kind of lit up, kind of not. That is really, really good there. Here's not my favorite image from the movie. We're going to get into that in a second. But my favorite image of the tall man. So there's a point in the movie where Jody's been starting to investigate. And he's trying to get into not Jody, Mike is starting to investigate, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with this tall man here, this funeral undertaker, right? And it's a daytime scene. And Jody's walking, or sorry, I keep saying Jody, but Mike is walking, and he looks and he sees a tall man walking across the street. And while that's happening, you got Reggie here, our 50-year-old, 20-year-old, whatever, opening his ice cream truck, and you see all like the smoke or steam or whatever the hell it is coming out of the ice cream truck, because obviously it's cold in there. And the tall man is standing behind it, and the way he turns his body and just looks at Mike is just fucking creepy as hell. I just love this image here with the smoke and the tall man standing behind it. It's the middle of the day there. Just fucking great. All right, my final image is my favorite image from the movie. Talking about dream sequences, this is absolutely, I think, it's absolutely a dream sequence that Mike is having. But he kind of wakes up from his dream, and look at this. This is the middle of the dream. He wakes up in his bed, and look at the tall man is presiding over him. My God, look at this. And you got tombstones in the background. And later on, in a moment here, you'll see like hands pop up from the side of the bed and kind of grab Jody. Like, that's what I mean with the themes of this movie. Like, that's where you get into the fear of death, right? This movie is all about death. It's dealing with funeral home and, people dying and shit like that. Mike lost his parents. He's scared of losing Jody. He's scared of dying himself. As a young kid, we don't understand what death is or the finality of it, and all that. So this is him trying to understand, and maybe this is his mind trying to, put a reason on why all this is happening, why this has happened to him, and it's probably terrifying to him. So that is just brilliant, great imagery right there. And finally, guys, we can't talk about Phantasm without talking about the score. I got it playing in the background, but the score to this movie is fucking incredible. Just really brings an ominous, creepy tone to it. And don't worry, they get their money's worth out of this score. Not quite as bad as Prince of Darkness, where it's playing all throughout the movie. But this music plays, and this score plays throughout this movie at just random times. It just picks up, and I like that. Is it overdone? I wouldn't say it's overdone. It's teetering on overdone, but because it's so good, because it's such a good score, and because it brings so much mystery and intrigue and atmosphere to this movie, I like how much they use it. So, like I said, guys, it's impossible to describe the plot of this movie. I just kind of wanted to talk about the chaotic brilliance and the brilliant imagery of this movie, and kind of what some of the themes, not so subtle themes, are in this movie. So thanks for watching, guys. Tell me in the comments if you're a fan of Phantasm, and I will see you guys on the next one.